webinar today is Pipeline Strategies for Finishing 2021 Strong. It's brought to you by Qwilr, Dialpad, and Mixmax, and we have speakers from each of the three companies. So first of all, I'd like to introduce Kyle Parrish, who is the VP of Sales at Mixmax. So Kyle, give a wave because you might be a little bit small on screens here, but with over 20 years of experience in sales, Kyle has been leading and developing high-performing sales teams for the past 14 years. He started his sales career in large organizations like Oracle and Google, and then he moved over to the startup realm to become VP of Sales in 2015. So Kyle, welcome. Please tell us, what does Mixmax do?
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be part of this panel today. Mixmax is a sales engagement software solution. And we automate or completely remove a lot of the manual tasks that all revenue generating teams have to perform on a daily basis. We enable reps to be more productive with their time so they don't have to spend it on busy work tasks like sending manual emails, scheduling manual calendar events, updating Salesforce. And we give them that time back to do higher value activities like selling or customer success.
Great. Awesome. Welcome, Kyle. And you got a shout out from Kara. So she loves Mixmax, so you have a fan.
Thank you, Kara.
All right, let's meet our next speaker, Kirsten Lorenzo, VP of Mid-Market and Enterprise Sales at Dialpad. Kirsten is Dialpad's VP of Sales with over 13 years of experience in sales leadership. She has an extensive history of elevating sales performance to exceed revenue and market share growth objectives across multiple technology companies. So Kirsten, we're delighted to have you today. I'm going to ask you to share a little bit with us about Dialpad, please.
Yeah, what a nice intro. Thank you very much for having me. It's great to be here. So Dialpad offers business and customer communications all in one unified app. So we cover everything from, if you're a sales user, a support user, we offer meetings, messaging, voice, video conferencing, as well as contact center. And we have AI layered in all methods of our communication. So we're pretty unique in that we actually transcribe every call in the background while it's happening live. So it gives us opportunities to give live coaching, improving your business communications. Again, whether you're in sales or you're in support or you're just a general business user. So thanks again for having me.
Great, thank you. All right, and finally, we have Chris Schreiber, who's the head of marketing at Qwilr. Chris has 15 years of experience leading high growth technology companies. And over the course of his career, Chris has built and led marketing teams for multiple growth stage software companies after beginning his career at Google. So Chris, welcome. And I'm going to ask you to tell us a little bit more about Qwilr.
Thanks a lot. Sorry, excited for the conversation today. Yeah, so Qwilr, we're a proposal software platform and really focused on helping sales and marketing teams make it easy to create proposals and collateral that really impress prospects and help get deals closed faster. Our unique approach is instead of using kind of static downloadable documents like PDFs or Microsoft Word, we enable teams to create sort of fully customized web pages for their sales collateral and to be able to essentially automate the generation of them. So directly from Salesforce or HubSpot CRM data, your sales reps can create these kind of very customized proposals, impress prospects, and help get deals closed faster.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Chris, and welcome to all of our speakers. But now let's go ahead and get into the meat of our presentation and why we're all here. Of course, Q4 is here, and it feels like this year has really gone fast. I know last year we were all kind of dragging through it, but this year it's gone pretty fast. Although many of us have experienced perhaps a slow sales period in the summer months between the US opening up from COVID restrictions and people, excited to get out and take a vacation again. It's been tough going for a lot of sales teams. I think I saw a recent stat from Expedia that 82% of Americans plan to take an extra year of vacation this year. But traditionally, Q4 is a time of great sales opportunity, and most companies have a very big Q4 push, making November and December very busy with a lot of deals. Maybe you're already seeing that increased activity now. But like I said, this year, it feels like we're seeing a lot more variations in pipeline. And maybe it's not as robust as it was in previous years. So I want to go ahead and ask all of you, how confident are you in your pipeline? Do you feel like you're going to hit your goal this year? So let me launch a poll, and I'm just going to ask you to vote very quickly. How confident are you about hitting your Q4 goal? Are you very confident, somewhat confident, you're hopeful but not really sure, or maybe you have no confidence at all? And there's no right or wrong answer here. We just want to gauge where you're at so we could better tailor our conversation. Let's take a minute to vote, and then I will share the poll results.
Really bummed I can't vote in this. The host and panelists can't vote because I'm in the same boat as everybody else here.
Yeah. Okay, let's go ahead and share the results. So you can see we have 21% are feeling very confident. That's great. 42% are somewhat confident. 37% are hopeful but not really sure. And nobody is really not confident at all. So that's kind of interesting. Kyle, what do you think of that?
I love it. I'm glad that nobody is freaking out right now. I'm glad that people are somewhat confident at least, or hopeful and maybe not sure. So they have the time to spend with us to hear how they can better close that pipeline that they do have.
Yeah, no, that's great. Kirsten, do you want to add anything to this?
No, I was going to say the same thing. And I think a lot of people either realize now that they have a huge gap, or they're feeling at least fairly good about the opportunities they've got in their pipeline. So that's good.
Yeah, great. All right. Okay. So let's take it a step further, though. We had a lot of people saying they're confident, some somewhat confident, and others hopeful but not sure. Let's take it a step further, and let's ask everyone now about your biggest challenges. We all have struggles in our pipeline or with our sales team. So where does your sales team struggle most? Is it in prospecting, qualifying, closing, or just in time in general? So now we have our second poll. Again, we just want to hear from you and where you're at. What is your biggest struggle? Prospecting, qualifying, closing, time. Got a lot of people voting here.
I was going to say there could be 6, 7, 8 other things on this list.
Definitely. So 58% says your biggest challenge is prospecting. All right. 16% said qualifying, 32% closing, and 21% said time. So Kirsten, please give us your thoughts about the poll.
It kind of doesn't surprise me. I think a lot of, I hear this a lot, like in the field, prospecting is absolutely one of the more difficult aspects of what we do. I think one of the topics we're going to talk about today is just like how we divide and conquer and how we have our reps spend their time. I know for my organization, prospecting is always difficult because it tends to be the thing that people put off. So if it's not prioritized in terms of like, these are our PG days, these are the hours we spend prospecting. When there's so much else you need to be doing in your deal cycle, that can be the thing that falls off, unfortunately. And I think it's just so critical for leaders to make sure they stay on top of their reps and help them prioritize their time so that that's something that stays at the forefront of how they spend their days.
That's great. Kyle, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, we're no different. We don't have the silver bullet, and prospecting is one of those things that evolves over time. What worked even as few as 90 days ago is not going to work today. And so, and actually you go through a cycle throughout the year. So if you're trying to build pipeline for Q4, that's a very different strategy than if you're trying to build it in Q1. And prospecting and time go hand in hand. Kirsten is absolutely right that people will put that off because everything else is more fun than prospecting. Prospecting is the absolute worst thing to do. And so, you'll prioritize other things. And like I said, there's no silver bullet, but just doing it, dedicating the time to make sure that you're actually doing it and going after the right types of prospects is so critical. And we can hit on that a little bit later too.
Great. Thank you. Okay, so Let me share a few industry stats because I think a lot of you are going to realize you're really not alone, as Kyle and Kirsten have shared already. So let's take a look at some industry stats here. First of all, 40% of salespeople say that prospecting is the most challenging part of sales. So if you selected prospecting, like I said, you are not alone. 72% of companies with fewer than 50 new opportunities per month didn't achieve their revenue goals. So again, the importance of prospecting and moving your prospects through the funnel. 36% of salespeople are challenged by closing a deal. So I know a few of you also said that you're challenged by closing. And lastly, on average, a salesperson spends about 28% of their time on admin tasks. So that's likely part of the problem too. Nearly a third of their day is spent on doing things other than selling. So definitely that can play havoc into building your pipeline. But it's not all doom and gloom. So I don't want to leave you with, this is going to be a depressing webinar. That's not the intent at all. But I really love this stat. And this is why we've gathered the panel that we have today, that the single most underutilized resource in any company is the sales leader. And so that's why we've asked Kyle and Kirsten and Chris to join us today to really share with us their tips and what they've learned throughout the course of their careers to help their teams be more successful. So with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and ask our first question of our panel. How does your team management change based on your pipeline outlook? So who'd like to kick us off? Kyle, would you like to start here?
Absolutely. I think there are, like I said before, there are phases of pipeline build. And the worst case scenario is you spend a ton of time building up your pipeline, and then you have a bunch of pipeline, and then you start to close it and your pipeline goes down and your revenue is going up. I don't know how to do it with my hands. What you really want to do is you want to keep prospecting activity high at all times while closing activity is also high at all times. You never want to be in a prospect only cycle or a closing only cycle. That's actually one of the reasons why we close our books on a monthly basis at Mixmax. Our deal cycles tend to be a little bit shorter. And so we're constantly trying to move deals through the cycle so that we're not chasing our tail, prospecting at the very beginning of a quarter and then closing at the very end, and then having to try to catch back up. We're trying to keep those cycles very minimal.
Yeah, good. Kirsten, what about you? How does your team management change?
Yeah, I can speak probably also more to upmarket teams. So like we've got, our Dialpad sells to all different sized companies, but we've got our SMB motion, which is a little more transactional. We've got mid-market and enterprise, which depending on the deal type and depending on the customer, it can be a longer cycle. So for us coming into Q4, there's only so much we can add incrementally to our pipeline for Q4 itself, right? Like we got to look at what's our time to close. Realistically, if the pipeline we have is the pipeline we have, and this is what we're working with, we have to make sure that we're really managing to the middle of the funnel, moving deals as thoroughly as we can, stage to stage, and trying to increase our win rate as best we can. So I really try to manage my team by saying, if this is what you got, you've got to really start making sure you've done preparation for all your meetings. The way that I see reps increase their win rate most successfully is by being the better rep in the deal, right? So being super prepared for every meeting and making sure we're spending time doing role plays and getting ahead of potential questions. And it's like prep. And that's how we make sure that that funnel that we do have is maximized to close for the current quarter.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit more about that. Maximizing the pipeline that you do have. So whether you have a really robust pipeline or maybe you have a smaller pipeline, what are some ways that you maximize that or help them to be more efficient in their close?
Yeah, I can do that first. So we at Dialpad have a really, we put a big importance on coaching our sales team, and we want to make sure, and I think this is, people talk about like doing role plays all the time, but I think in my experience, that's another activity that tends to fall off the priority list is like actual role playing, but it's so effective for our teams. So we usually start the week with stand-ups. We try to figure out on the on the field, who has an important meeting this week. And then we actually do a role play of how that meeting will go. We have them share, what's your presentation that you're going to be using for this meeting? What are the questions you're going to be asking? That way, by the time they actually get on the call, they have practiced, and it helps us maximize that opportunity. And I think, again, it's easy to say, oh, we should all role play, but I think a lot of leaders tend to let that slide off of their priority list. So I would just recommend, if you kind of gotten away from doing coaching or having your reps prep for your calls and doing it as a group or even individually, I would pull that back onto your priority list.
Good. Good.
Great point. We did a role play on sales stand-up this morning. And to take it a step further from what Kirsten said, I think it's a phenomenal idea to have reps bring a real world scenario and then role play it. But what Kirsten said hit home with me, because I was actually the one doing the role play this morning. So I was trying to model what I would do in that situation as opposed to making the rep practice it. So it gives another perspective. I couldn't agree more.
Good. Good. Chris, do you want to chime in here? Do you have
yeah, I mean, I think Kirsten's right on there in terms of like really managing to the middle of the funnel. I think particularly with the pandemic and all the challenges, like a lot of deals got kind of stuck in the middle where you did have an interested buyer, but there's just so much uncertainty that things started moving a little slower. And so that is like a really important piece to be focusing in on, like, what are we doing to re-engage prospects? Where are we really at in terms of forecasting what this deal can be? And then how might we like change the talk track a little bit so that we're speaking within like the environment that we're now in and making a solid case for how we can help with your goals. And, really speaking to kind of the urgency of Q4 that every business is probably focusing on for the most part. And how are you going to enable them in the short term to hit those goals? I think we've been spending a lot of time there from the marketing and sales side to think about how might we sort of update our offers, update our sort of messaging so that we seem like a sort of an immediate win if we can get the deal closed.
That's great. That's great. And I love that you threw in urgency, of course, with Q4. What are some proven tactics that maybe each of you have used to add pipeline predictability to ensure that the winnable deals are won and closed by the end of the quarter? And I think before we dive too far into this question, we might want to define what is a winnable deal. So Kyle, would you kind of talk a little bit about how you define a winnable deal?
I knew it was going to be a race between me and Kirsten to answer this question, so I'm glad you called. I think Chris and I had this discussion not that long ago, actually, last week, about what are the winnable deals you want to focus on, and what are the deals that you really should pay a ton of attention to. And Chris made a great point that in the beginning of the year, Q1, Q2, maybe you're stretching your ideal customer profile out a little bit to find out where your product may become the next industry to tackle or the next geo to tackle. But in Q4, it's all about focus and execution. And so I believe that in Q4, if you're looking to really hone your skills on what is a winnable deal, go to that core ideal customer profile and look to those deals to make sure that you are really giving them the time and attention that they need. And I'll let Kirsten talk about mutual action plans. It's something we're both a huge fan of. But there's some other things that you can do that are within your ideal customer profile. They may be your existing customers. They may be referrals that your existing customers give to you. It's things like those, the ones that fit your criteria for your product, your service, your offering so perfectly that you should win those deals. There is a time and a place to expand into other areas. I think that's maybe earlier in the year, devising a different strategy, but in Q4, really focusing on the ones that you can win because your product fits them so well, either the persona, the company, the use case, things like that. It's so important.
Kirsten, you want to talk about the mutual plans?
Love to. So we actually, pre this webinar, we're chatting about some of our other strategies, and I think many leaders on the call might agree, but mutual action plans, I think, are one of the easiest and most reliable ways to make sure your team is working winnable deals. Because it really, as long as they truly are mutual, this is the part of the conversation we had, it's really important that if your company is the type of company where there's going to be some sort of engagement, like a trial or a POC, or even if it's a fairly short timeline, if you've done a good job as the rep at the beginning to outline what are the things that we're going to need to do together to get us to a decision and to hopefully get a contract signed, it's understanding what the customer needs as well, and not just what we need, right? So what's the action that's going to be taken on the customer side? Is it truly mutual? And I think if you're using that as a framework to hold up to your deals and say, I'm only going to forecast and look at the deals that have a mutual action plan because I know that the customer has intent to do something rather than just interest. I think that's like one of the biggest barometers for me to be able to tell what deals are winnable is which ones have we really gotten mutual action to close.
Mm-hmm. That's great. That's great.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. A mutual action plan should, at its very minimum, give you timing and process. And those are two things that every sales rep should just want. That's like pure gold for them. Understand who the decision makers are, how the decision gets made, the process by which it gets made, and the timing. And if you can get all those and you document it, then every time that you make or miss a milestone, it's an opportunity to reach back out to the customer to develop further engagement and to understand at a deeper level where the next steps are going to come from. It's not just, hey, let's schedule the next step in the process. It's let's schedule all the steps and then let's make a plan to hit each of those milestones.
That's great. Chris, you represent kind of the target persona for a lot of people on this call as head of marketing. So what considerations should sellers be thinking about on the buyer side?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've certainly been in a lot of buy side conversations recently, and I think there's a pattern in like the sort of software and services partners that we've moved forwards with, is that they were able to kind of speak with me pretty specifically about a roadmap that would impact this year, and then talk about sort of growth beyond it. But not try to sell me the entire farm like right away. Be sort of quite clear about like, here's what it would look like to make an impact and get results for you this year, and let's really kind of map out that timeline together, and let's talk about ways to grow and expand out from that. And I thought, those are the partners that are really kind of like seeing the world as it is, and kind of hearing like what I'm trying to get into in terms of quick wins, and it's sort of mapping their solution to it, versus sort of the all or nothing sale where you're just not being that empathetic and not sort of like taking into account what I'm saying about my specific kind of business focus. So I think that empathy, that sort of like road mapping of short-term results versus longer-term expansions important in the sales cycle.
Good.
I love that you said that, Chris. We call it the crawl, walk, run approach. Everybody on this call probably has multiple features, offerings, products that your company can provide. To come in and try to sell everything all at once is probably not the best solution. To come in and satisfy the pain, or to remove the pain, alleviate the pain that they have, is the best way to get somebody to take action now. And if you're looking to impact Q4 with a quick win deal, it's not trying to go enterprise-wide, probably, unless you've been working this deal for a year and a half already. It might be to take the piece off the table that satisfies Chris's need today, right? And that might be a smaller deal for you, but then it gives you the opportunity to set it up for success long-term and grow with them.
That's good. That's good. I like that. So as we kind of come out of this pandemic funk, for lack of a better word, and different parts of the globe are experiencing it still in different ways and recovering at different paces. Does in-person versus virtual selling, what's the impact there? What's the impact on Q4 and creating that urgency? How do things shift with trying to sell via Zoom, instead of an office, or are you selling in person?
I can take that one. I'm actually visiting our Austin office this week, so I'm trying to get a little more in person back in my life. I think for us at Dialpad, we generate business through a mix of direct selling as well as with our channel. So I'm seeing I'm seeing some areas of the country open up more. People are wanting and craving that in-person interaction. So my team has kind of taken the direction of, let's ask our customers and our prospects and our partners like, how are you feeling about having events today? In some regions, like we've actually started doing in-person events again, to build relationships, especially for like our prospecting, as well as building relationships with our partners. And other areas, it's going to stay virtual for a while. So I think it's showing respect for your prospect, understanding where they're at in terms of either the region that they're living in or whatever they're comfortable with. And then if you can, I'm a big believer in in-person selling. I think it's really helpful to have an in-person conversation. But the great thing is, in the meantime, we've got video. And I think being able to build rapport, at least over video, is a great middle ground, I think, to just calling your prospects. But we're trying to get after in-person events as quickly as we can. Although it seems like it might be a while before it becomes consistent again.
Yeah, good. What about you, Kyle?
Business dependent for sure. Kirsten's team is built with people who have sold face-to-face there probably for a lot of their career, and their product lends itself to that sort of selling. I love to sell in person as well. I think that it develops a relationship like nothing else. I cannot sit on Zoom and watch myself every day, all day, even though that's all that I do. I get Zoom fatigue. So in person is definitely important. But our business, we tend to focus on the SMB, right? Small and medium-sized businesses. And so a lot of times our sales cycles and our deal sizes don't allow for in-person selling. It would blow up our model. We can't sell a $10,000 deal and spend $2,500 on the travel to go see them. So it's very business dependent. We would love to go see customers in person, especially if they're local or something like that. And we found, just like Kirsten said, that a lot of customers are just not allowing people in their office just yet. If somebody did invite us into their office, boom, we would be there as long as it made sense. So just to reinforce what Kirsten said, it's really customer dependent, and to ask them how comfortable they're feeling or what their standard operating procedure is important.
That's
Empathy,
great.
empathy.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so you're coaching your team, and your reps are complaining about getting ghosting or prospects going dark. How do you advise them, or what are your thoughts for overcoming or avoiding ghosting altogether? Kirsten, you want to kick us off on this one?
Yeah, this actually goes back to the mutual plan conversation to me. I think if you've done a really good job of validating pain and you understand the criteria someone's looking for, you've asked really thorough questions around what this engagement's going to look like, you've got a better shot at not being ghosted. I find that when I ask a rep who tells me, hey, this person's gone dark, and I ask them, well, like, walk me through what the engagements look like so far, pull up your mutual plan. Most of the time they haven't had one, right? Or they just maybe haven't asked enough questions around designing what this engagement will look like, and then being able to hold each other accountable to the timeline they agreed to. So it's usually not mutual if you're being ghosted. I think things will always change for a rep, right? Like when you're in a deal and buyer tells you they're going to do X, Y, and Z, and they still do go dark, I think that will happen. But I do find that if you've done a good job up front at setting expectations on what this will look like, that's less likely.
What is it about the sales profession that allows somebody else just to not respond to an email so quickly? I don't know. It's always bothered me. It's like we've spent a month together, and now all of a sudden you won't answer a simple email. It's a couple things for me. One is actually something that Mixmax does very well and uniquely in the industry, is that we allow for very easy engagement from prospects and customers alike. So we've built things into our product that allow for customers to respond to you with the click of a button. So polls, surveys, yes, no questions, built right into the emails that are being sent out. And we find that can increase response rates as much as 200% when somebody is ghosting you. So there's that. And then to push a little bit further on what Kirsten said, which I wholeheartedly agree with, it all starts in the discovery process. And if you have enough there, if there's enough of an opportunity there and it's a good fit, then there should be no reason for them to ghost you. Of course, things may change and the timeline may change. But if you've done a good job in discovery to understand what the true business pains are and what the personal pain for this person are, and engaged with other decision makers, or even coaches and champions, if you use Medic or MedPick, there should be no reason that you're single threaded in any deal, no matter how small. There should always be more than one person that you're talking to, sometimes above the power line, sometimes below the power line. Usually it's the people below the power line that are the most willing to pick up the phone and give you information. So it's always good to build those relationships, even if they're not the true decision maker. So if you're talking to one person at a deal, count on something going wrong and you getting ghosted. So that's a weak point that I would go after. The last thing that I will say, if there's an opportunity with your product in your business to quantify the problem that you are solving for the customer, to put a dollar amount on it or a number of hours on it, or company or employee dissatisfaction with the current process, something that you can quantify that makes sense for the business to make a change, absolutely do it, document it, and get the prospect to agree to it, so that if they do ghost you, you can go back and remind them that, hey, remember when we did this together and you said that this was a $250,000 problem in the organization, and we're asking you to spend $25,000 to solve it? That seems like a really easy 10x ROI problem to me. Like, why are we not hurrying up to solve this?
Yeah, that's good. Chris,
you can
do you
say
want to add anything?
yeah, I'm gonna say, like, on the buy side, like, I think to both your points, like a direct conversation about sort of timeline that you're on is really important. And I think when sellers skip that step and kind of just keep selling without really having that conversation of what realistically are we talking about here, like how urgent issue this is, that's where you can get a little bit of a danger zone. So I've always tried to be very forthright about where are we at realistically in terms of urgency for the solution versus exploratory. And I think that helps set expectations. I think, ghosting, organizations are complex. You wake up to a problem you didn't expect to have, and now your point of contact is no longer responding, and it's actually has nothing to do with you. And it's because this other thing happened, and it's just like they just can't quite get back to that conversation. And so, especially if you've had a conversation about timeline, you sort of have a sense of how much does it make sense to push here. And one thing that I will say that, like, at least in my experience, people that have drawn me back in when I've gone a little quiet is that, like, everyone cares about their competitors. Like, I don't care here. Everyone cares about the companies they're competing against, and where you have opportunities to talk about insights that serve the competitive market. It feels like it very often draws interest back in, even if your direct sales conversation is still up in the air. So, where you have had a good conversation and maybe are working with another company that's in a related space, those always seem like opportunities to pull that interest back in, even if there's still kind of ambiguity on the buying timeline.
Good. Okay, it's been a good discussion so far. I want to invite the audience, if you have questions for our panelists, please go ahead and type them into the chat. But I want to do a round robin, excuse me, with each of our speakers and kind of ask you, what are your final comments or tips for the audience, as we think about pipeline? So what's your big takeaway? Kyle, I'll start with you since you're on my screen first here.
If we're talking about closing Q4 and closing the end of the year strong, it's focus. Everybody wants to bring new opportunities into the pipeline. And look, if your sales cycles are short, like Mixmax's are, our sales cycles are less than 30 days. So we're still building pipeline for Q4. But in a lot of organizations, it's a 90-day sales cycle. So you're not building pipeline for Q4 anymore. That doesn't mean pipeline build isn't important. It means that focusing on what you need to do for this quarter is of the utmost importance. So, manage time properly so that your reps have the capability to do what is the most important thing for them to do in Q4. You showed a statistic that 28% of reps' time is spent on administrative tasks. Mm-hmm. I won't sell you on Mixmax here, but when I hear that, that's just like a huge opportunity to just remove busy work, remove manual tasks. I'm not saying Mixmax is the ultimate solution to do that, but if that is an issue in your organization, identify it now, remove that obstacle for them, and let them focus on what you really want them to do. Remember that you're paying them to do a job, not to enter data into a system. You don't want them focusing on that. You really want them focusing on what you've hired them to do, which is sell or to make your customers more successful.
Great, thank you. And you've picked one of my most favorite words, which is focus. So thank you for sharing your comments. Kirsten, now I'm going to ask you, what's your final comments or big takeaway for our audience here?
Yeah, it's cheesy, but I am one of those people who believes in Q4 magic. Like there's like things tend to get done, the hustle's there. I think people feel the urgency both on the buying and the selling side. I think a really helpful exercise for focus, if it's one you haven't done yet, it's not an easy one and it's definitely not quick, but I really recommend outlining clearly and making sure you've got very clear deliverables on your Salesforce stages or whatever CRM you use. If you have a really clear idea of exit criteria and requirements by stage, it can really help you have that focus with your team on pipeline. One thing that we just very recently have done this exercise at Dialpad, and we're seeing is it's forcing us to disqualify or move out pipeline that really isn't active, like truly active, where we don't have a mutual plan or we don't have a really good idea of the intent for this buyer. That is, even though it's a little bit scary because it's basically whittling down our pipeline to focus on what's really real and what's active. It's giving us that focus. And I think that is really important so that you can maximize your opportunity.
That's great. That's great. Good. And Jason has a question. Jason, I'm going to get to your question in just 1 minute, but I want to ask Chris. Chris, what's your big takeaway or final comments for our audience on pipeline?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely very supportive of the thought here about just focus and double down on what's been working. And then just, I think the thing I would add to it is empathy, like hone your messaging about how you can help your prospects finish their year strong.
Good. So we heard focus, we heard outline and clear away the noise, and we heard empathy. So good takeaway points. We have a question from Jason, and I'll open it up to any of our speakers. But speaking of focus, how do you effectively balance New Year planning versus closing out the year strong, which I think is a great question. So who'd like to kick us off with that one?
Jason, when I figure it out, I'll let you know. Just kidding. It's difficult, right? You don't want to do 2022 planning. And by the way, unless you are an established business, unless you've been in business for 15 years or something like that, and you're on a pretty consistent growth path, I would suggest that you don't do 2022 planning. You do first half 2022 planning. You do Q1 2022 planning. I know boards don't love to hear that, but guess what? Things change over the course of a year, right? If you're a new startup who's growing 100% year over year, to say that we're going to just do that again next year with the same plan, or like maybe it's a slightly different plan, but it's so far out that you just don't know. I think that that's difficult to do. Both of them are important. I would say compartmentalize as much as you can, right? Your primary focus should be closing the year strong, because guess what? If you're a sales leader and you don't close the year strong, you might not be there in 2022. So prioritize the things that the business really needs you to do. And make time for 2022 planning, or first half 2022 planning, hopefully, but don't prioritize it over the real goal, which is finishing the year strong.
Good. Kirsten, anything to add?
For a lot of businesses that I've been a part of, the helpful thing, I think, from a sales leadership perspective is asking your team to continue forecasting for the following quarter. I think one trap that a lot of teams fall into is they get so focused on the current quarter that it's like, we haven't even thought about next quarter. It is like, no one's even really looking at it. And I think that's a really problematic thing, because then the next quarter you're chasing a number again, and you haven't really spent a lot of time thinking about what's that real active pipeline. So I think also just making sure you've got a good cadence on your team to forecast for the current month, current quarter, whatever your cadence is, making sure that at least the next quarter is really a part of that regularly.
Good, good. So I'm going to ask everybody, what's your mix of sales versus marketing generated leads? That might be something that everybody's wondering in their minds. So Kirsten, what's your mix?
Yeah, so we actually do about 50% through our channels of their partnerships. 30% would be from marketing, and then about 20 from sales. And then sales is actually split between AEs and BDRs. So we have BDRs helping the AEs with outbound. We've got goals for each team, but the total make up the 20%.
Okay. Kyle?
Can I just first say I'm so jealous of that. We need to build a better channel strategy so that we have a higher percentage coming from channel partners. Today we're about 50-50 actually. We are lucky enough to have product-led growth as well. So I combine product with marketing. We have some marketing efforts as well as product efforts, some virality in the product, and that's about 50% of our pipeline, both actually with respect to dollars as well as SQOs. And then the other 50% is just good old-fashioned outbound. Our AEs outbound. We have a great SDR team that outbounds. And our win rates are very different on the two channels. However, the amount of pipeline built and the approximate number of SQOs is pretty much the same. Our outbound deals tend to be a little bit bigger for obvious reasons. If you're outbounding into an organization, you get to choose who you outbound to, the size of the company, the location, all those things. You can make sure that they fit your ICP. Whereas with inbound, you have less control over that.
Good, good. Chris, would you like to chime in?
Yeah, I mean, today, like majority of our pipeline is inbound, and after that, it's a virality probably that drives the second highest, and that's someone receives a Qwilr powered proposal, gets excited like, wow, our proposals could look like this, and then comes direct, and then certainly a lot of efforts gone towards outbound and channel this year. So I think that mix is going to probably look very different next year, but that's how we are today.
Good. So Kyle, you mentioned product-led growth. So we're going to continue with this theme. Is this part of your strategy, and how do you manage it from the sales side?
It's a great question, and I don't want to spend too much time on this because I don't know how relevant it is for everybody on the call, but it is something that we are very lucky to have, right? Mixmax is, we put it out on the internet and anyone can come buy it for an individual use case. And so there is some virality in the product when people use that and it says sent with Mixmax, or somebody creates a calendar event and they see that it was powered by Mixmax. And so that does contribute a consistent, nice inflow of signups as well as demo requests, things like that we consider inbound. It's not something that we focus specific attention on today. We have in the past. We had a growth team that was specifically focused on that as their job and just growing signups over time, and they did a phenomenal job. And then we decided, as startups should, to maybe reassign those resources to something that's more high value. And so that's actually what we did. And so today we don't have a specific team driving that product-led growth, but it's been going on for so long that we have seen that it's not growing or shrinking. It's staying pretty consistent. I don't know if that answers your question, but I didn't want to go too deep into PLG.
No, that's great. That's great. Chris or Kirsten, anything to add to that?
I mean, I think Qwilr has seen a lot of evolution here. Like it was primarily a product-led growth company to start, and just as we started to sort of understand like the composition of the deals that were coming in through sort of the beginning of our sales team versus inbound and product-led, started to realize like, we're going to invest more on the sales-led side, and have kind of been in that mode over the last few years. But product-led is great, and sort of everyone benefits from on the go-to-market side. So I think your ideal position is that you have growth investments on both sides, and it kind of hedges your bets in some ways in terms of where's the revenue going to come from in a given month. But you do need ownership on all sides, and I think that can be a little bit complex, like organizationally, if you're a startup trying to both manage that kind of self-serve product-led funnel as well as the sales-led funnel, because they're two very different universes to be managing. So I think that's the biggest challenge there, even if your product could support it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, really well said. You could start with PLG and then very quickly figure out that in order to get to where you really want to go, having a sales team that focuses on specific outbound opportunities, knowing your ideal customer profile, it's so key to just let the product lead your growth. There's very few companies who have made it to the upper echelons with just that strategy.
Mm-hmm. Good. Okay, it's been a great discussion today. I want to thank each one of our speakers, Kyle, again, from Mixmax, Kirsten from Dialpad, Chris from Qwilr. All three companies are really dedicated to helping you become more successful in your sales and getting more out of your input, getting more outcome from your input. So thank you to each of you for being here today. I want to thank our audience also for joining us. Patrick had asked asked, will the recording be available? And the answer is yes. We will share it later on today or first thing tomorrow morning so that you can view it again and share it with your teams. I also want to let everyone know that we have another masterclass session coming up on November 9th. And the topic will be optimizing the discovery call. So Kyle, you made reference to that. We may have to pull you in on this one, but
Chomping at the bit to join that one.
Thank you. But there's so much great information that you can get from their discovery call and then leverage it throughout the sales conversation. So if you are interested in that, in your closing survey, we give you the opportunity to go ahead and pre-register for that. Just select that button and we'll get you signed up for that. Even if you can't attend the live, you'll get the recording just like we do on this one. So again, I want to thank everybody for spending some time with us today. I'm going to give you back 10 minutes of your day. Don't spend it all at the same place, but we do appreciate the time that you spend with us, and we wish you good sales in Q4. So thank you very much. This concludes our time together.